After the SAT exam ended, my boyfriend Ethan's mother gave his old books to my brother Mason. Mason found Ethan's secret crush diary among the pile of books. The notebook was thick, documenting 3 years, a full 1,096 pages. Mason cleared his throat and read teasingly in my ear. March 1st, gave the strawberry milk to Sophia, but she refused it again. Had to give it to that Vivian girl instead. March 2nd, bought 2 movie tickets but Sophia didn't show up. Didn't want to waste them, so I had to go watch it with Vivian. The last page read, failed to confess to Sophia. In a fit of anger, I accepted Vivian's confession. Mason laughed breathlessly. Vivian, how embarrassing. You chased Ethan for 10 years, and he only agreed to date you to spite the girl he actually liked. I silently clenched the hem of my school uniform, my face flushing red with embarrassment. I turned and went back to my room, opened my wish journal, and crossed out the wish about attending the same university as Ethan. This was the scene Mason saw when he chased after me. He leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, continuing to mock me. Vivian, you're so petty. So what if Ethan deceived you once? Someone as outstanding as him. You were never good enough for him anyway. If it wasn't for Sophia rejecting him, would you have ever had a chance to take her place? This is what they call a blessing in disguise, understand? Not really. Mason rolled his eyes at me and sneered. Stop pretending. There's no point explaining to someone as stupid as you. Anyway, if I were Ethan, I definitely wouldn't like someone as dumb and plain looking as you either. After all, when you stand next to Sophia, you don't even qualify to be background decoration. I raised my hand to hit him, but he made a face at me and quickly ran away. This diary was Ethan's heart and soul. After thinking it over, I felt I should return it to him. So I sent him a message on Snapchat. Ethan was always slow to reply to messages. Sometimes a single message would take over 10 hours, or even a full day, before he'd send back a brief response. Even after we started dating, this situation didn't change at all. I'd always consoled myself that it was just his personality, and I shouldn't take it to heart. Until I saw the diary, where Ethan would stay up all night waiting for Sophia's messages, and could drop anything he was doing to reply to her instantly. That's when I realized. It wasn't that he was aloof, it was just that I wasn't important to him. As expected, this message sank like a stone. A day passed with no activity in the chat window. I decided to deliver it in person. The next morning, I stood at his front door. Through the clean glass window, Ethan sat at the table eating breakfast, exchanging conversation with his mother. My hand hovered above the doorbell. Before I could press it, Ethan's voice passed through the window and clearly reached my ears. I don't want to apply to NYU anymore. I'm probably going to apply to Harvard instead. My hand gripping the diary suddenly tightened. Then I heard his mother ask, didn't you and Vivian agree to go to NYU together? Why the sudden change to Harvard? Is this Vivian's idea? No, it's my own decision. I haven't told her. His mother's expression immediately darkened. You're dating Vivian, and not only are you not applying to the same university, you're not even discussing it with her? Is this how you treat your girlfriend? Her tone was sharp, and Ethan also lost his temper for the first time. He slammed his teacup on the table. What era are we living in? Who says dating means you have to apply to the same university? That's so backward. Besides, with Vivian's grades, it's questionable whether she can even get into NYU. Why do you have to bind us together? I stood there helplessly, my fingertips digging deep into my palm. I remembered the encouraging words Ethan had said at school about how I could definitely get into NYU. My nose stung uncontrollably. So those words were all lies. He looked down on me just like everyone else. I suppressed the urge to cry. Before he pushed the door open, I left the diary on the windowsill and fled in a hurry. After that day, I didn't say another word to Ethan. Instead, he changed his usual behavior. The messages he sent in those 2 days nearly matched 2 months' worth. Yet he never mentioned the diary. On the night scores were released, Ethan's house suddenly lost internet connection, so he had to come to my house temporarily to use ours. Mom washed a plate of fruit and placed it in front of him, some tropical fruits she normally wouldn't buy. She smiled and told Ethan not to be nervous. Mason also busied himself massaging Ethan's shoulders, serving him water, extremely attentive. Then he looked at me sitting alone in the corner with nothing and laughed. Don't secretly cry later if you didn't do as well as Ethan. I get so annoyed every time I hear you cry. You brat, is that any way to talk to your sister? Ethan laughed and pinched his arm. He scratched his head. Oh, she's used to it. She's thick-skinned. These little comments don't hurt her at all. She always says she's better looking than Sophia. I tell her she's being narcissistic, but she won't believe it. Ethan, you tell her. Doesn't she fall far short compared to Sophia? Mason had also seen that diary, so naturally he knew he was deliberately trying to embarrass me. Ethan froze for a moment, then glanced at me sideways. I lowered my head. So embarrassed I wanted to escape immediately. In the end, he took the initiative to break the awkward tension, half joking. Stop making fun of your sister. I'm sure she wouldn't ask such a question. Alright, everyone stop dwelling on this. It's almost time to check scores. At 8 o'clock sharp, both Ethan's and my score pages appeared simultaneously. In an instant, the atmosphere became extremely tense. Ethan and I had received the same score. My parents' first reaction wasn't excitement, but to scrutinize the screen repeatedly, then ask me where I'd copied from. Mason first praised Ethan effusively, then said to me with a grin, "You didn't even get caught? Vivian, your cheating skills are off the charts. You should teach me sometime." The emotions I'd been suppressing finally erupted. Tears streamed down uncontrollably. I violently pulled back my chair and yelled at them for the first time. I didn't cheat. I earned this score with my own ability. Everyone was clearly stunned. After playing the role of the good girl for 18 years, they'd already carved my compliant image into their bones. They obviously didn't believe I would suddenly lose my temper. Under their shocked gazes, I got up and ran outside. Before opening the door, I heard Ethan's voice. He was defending me. "Uncle, Aunt, you've misunderstood Vivian. She works very hard at school. This SAT score is what she deserves. We should be happy for her." I'd barely taken 2 steps outside when Ethan followed me out. He walked alongside me, and after a few words of comfort, suddenly asked, "We'll be filling out college applications in a few days. Where are you thinking of applying?" If this had been before, when Ethan asked this question, I would have said NYU without hesitation. But that day, his conversation with his mother had left a thorn in my heart. I didn't answer immediately, but threw the question back to him. "Where do you want to go?" Even though I already knew the answer. He paused, then replied, "I'll probably go with NYU." After meeting my gaze, Ethan immediately looked away, afraid I might see through him. My chest ached as if pierced by countless needles. 2 seconds later, I looked away, my voice hoarse. "Same as you." "That's great then. We can go together." After he spoke, his eyes looked forward again. I stared at him. The words about breaking up that I'd been contemplating swirled on my tongue several times, but I couldn't bear to say them. On the way back, Ethan and I parted ways. I knew he was lying to me, and I was lying to him too. Ethan didn't want to apply to the same university as me. I would fulfill his wish. I wouldn't apply to either Harvard or NYU. Cowardice and unwillingness made me unable to speak the word ending. So I would use this method to say goodbye to him properly. This relationship that was impure from the start, I didn't want it anymore. We had to return to school to fill out college applications. Afraid others would discover our relationship, Ethan specifically told me beforehand to avoid suspicion and not to approach him at school. I nodded in agreement. His absence would actually make it more convenient for me to act. By the time I finished filling out the application, it was already noon. Ethan was waiting for me far from the school. As soon as we met, he asked, "Did you put NYU as your first choice?" I lied without changing my expression. "Yes. I also applied to NYU." My throat tightened. I stared at his smile, momentarily dazed, unable to process it. Wasn't Ethan doing everything possible to avoid me? To not apply to the same university as me? What did this mean now? It wasn't until the evening when the school organized an alumni dinner that I suddenly understood. It wasn't for me, it was for Sophia. Sophia had also applied to NYU. Naturally, Ethan wouldn't pass up this golden opportunity to get close to her. Most of the dishes on the table were very spicy. Unable to handle spicy food, I had few options, so halfway through the meal, my stomach was still empty. There was one last slice of pizza left on the plate. The second I reached for it, Sophia also extended her hand. Our eyes met in midair. I was starving. The frustration bottled up inside me made me unwilling to yield. Sophia seemed to sense this and was too proud to withdraw her fork. In the standoff, a hand with distinct knuckles reached across in front of me and placed that slice of pizza in Sophia's bowl. Ethan set down his fork and looked at me sideways, his tone gentle. "Sophia hasn't eaten much all evening. Let her have this slice. If you want some, I'll buy you more on the way home." Glances from all directions landed on me. I understood the mockery in them. As if saying competing with Sophia for food was overestimating myself. I immediately lowered my head in embarrassment and pretended to be busy eating several bites of spicy stir-fried meat. The spiciness spread from my tongue, sliding into my stomach, all of it burning with pain. I somehow felt like laughing. I wanted to say that actually, I hadn't eaten much either. But when I caught his gentle gaze as he glanced at Sophia, in the end I said nothing. I couldn't compete with her anyway, could I? Why invite humiliation? After the dinner ended, they suggested going to karaoke. When Ethan saw Sophia was going, he eagerly signed up too. I didn't want to participate and be a third wheel, so I called a rideshare home. The spasms in my stomach made it impossible to straighten up, and fine beads of sweat covered my forehead. I leaned against the seat back, enduring the pain while typing out a message. When the driver reached the destination, the words in the chat box were just being sent out. I had officially broken up with him. At midnight, Ethan sent me a Snapchat message telling me to come downstairs. I threw on a thin jacket and went out. He was sitting on a bench in the park, a pile of cigarette butts at his feet. This was the first time I knew he smoked. It was different from the person I knew. Ethan's expression was gloomy. He didn't look to be in a good mood. Thinking about last night's dinner, he'd probably been rejected by Sophia again. Seeing me standing in front of him, he got straight to the point. Vivian, why are you breaking up with me? I didn't quite understand. Wasn't this the result Ethan had always wanted? He liked Sophia, not me. What was wrong with me proposing a breakup? I thought about it and finally answered. Because of that slice of pizza tonight. I was a bit sad I didn't get to eat it. Just because of one slice of pizza? Yes, just because of that. Ethan laughed bitterly at my response. Didn't I say Sophia hadn't eaten much, so I let her have that slice, and that I'd buy you more on the way back? Why do you have to fixate on that one slice? Vivian, why are you so petty? What was so special about that pizza? His words placed all the blame on me, but he didn't know that some food only has appeal in specific settings. Once removed from that context, there's no desire to touch it. It's true for food, and for people too. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. That slice of pizza wasn't special. What was special was your attitude. She wasn't the only one at the table who hadn't eaten much. I hadn't either. But your gaze only stayed on Sophia, so you could only see her. You like her. I can't force you to like me. I just don't want to force myself anymore. Ethan was smart. He understood immediately what I meant. He remained silent for a long time, then frowned and said, "You saw my diary?" "Yes." He rubbed his brow, his voice unable to hide his exhaustion. "That was all written a long time ago. When filling out applications, I chose NYU for you. Isn't that enough to show my attitude?" Seeing that I remained silent, Ethan's patience ran out. He asked me one last time. "I'll ask you one last time, Vivian. Are you sure you want to break up with me?" I nodded firmly. "Yes." "Fine. You said it yourself. When you get to NYU, I won't wait for you. And you'd better not regret it when I'm with Sophia." I agreed to everything. Ethan stared at me intently, his eyes turning red from frustration. After accumulating enough disappointment, he left. After that day, we never contacted each other again. Our relationship instantly hit rock bottom. Mason would sometimes deliberately bring up Ethan at the dinner table, saying he and Sophia had finally achieved their happy ending. Ethan and Sophia are the perfect match. Both talented and beautiful. Just standing there, you can't look away. So much more pleasing to the eye than standing with you. TSK, too bad you didn't see it in person. I kept my head down eating, showing no reaction. He couldn't help but poke me. "Hey, don't you have anything to say about this?" "Oh, congratulations." My tone was flat. The day the acceptance letters arrived, I received a call from the delivery person and went downstairs. I ran right into Ethan, who had also come to pick up his letter. His gaze flashed over me, deliberately pretending not to see me. I kept my distance from him, walking one behind the other to the delivery person. When the acceptance letter was handed to him, the delivery guy smiled. "After delivering all day, you're the only one from NYU in this area. Not bad, young man." Ethan's body suddenly trembled. He immediately turned to look at me. I knew what he was thinking at that moment. So under his bewildered gaze, I stepped forward with a smile. "Vivian Walker, Cornell University." The courier's hand hovered between us for a fraction of a second, holding the thick cardboard overnight envelope. On the front, the bold scarlet emblem of Cornell University caught the pale morning light. Ethan's acceptance letter from NYU remained in his left hand, the paper slightly crumpled where his thumb had tightened. The smug, distant expression he had worn just a second before, the one that said "I told you so, I told you I wouldn't wait for you," was frozen on his face. His mouth was slightly open, a small dry sound catching in his throat. "Cornell," he whispered. The courier didn't care about the silent drama unfolding on the Walker family's driveway. He handed me the pen, pointed to the signature line on his digital pad, and once I finished signing, climbed back into his brown van. The door slid shut with a heavy metallic thud, and the vehicle rumbled down the street, leaving us in the quiet of the suburban morning. You didn't apply to NYU," Ethan said. His voice was no longer flat or confident. It was thin, almost hollow, as if the air had been knocked out of his lungs. "You told me you did. On the day we filled out the applications, you said." "I lied, Ethan," I said. My voice was calm, surprising even myself. There was no shaking, no heat, no tears. "Just like you lied when you told me you applied to NYU for my sake, while you were actually just following Sophia." "Vivian." The front door of my house clicked open. Mason stepped onto the porch, a half-eaten piece of toast in his hand. He had been waiting inside, ready to witness my failure, ready to see the look of devastation on my face when I received a rejection letter or a local state college acceptance while Ethan held his golden ticket to New York. What's the holdup? Mason called out, his voice dripping with his usual lazy mockery. Did Vivian get into the local community college? Don't worry, Viv. They have great parking. His eyes landed on the heavy, white envelope in my hand. He stopped talking. His gaze flicked from the bold red letters of Cornell University to Ethan's pale, motionless figure. What is that? Mason asked, his boots clacking down the wooden steps of the porch. He snatched the envelope from my hand before I could stop him, turning it over to read the back. Cornell? The Ivy. This has to be a mistake. Did they send this to the wrong Walker? It has my name on it, Mason, I said, taking it back from his grip. Vivian Walker. Early decision, College of Human Ecology. Mason's mouth twisted. He looked at Ethan, waiting for his friend to laugh, to tell him it was a prank, to put me back in my place. But Ethan was still staring at the ground, his fingers clenching the NYU letter, so hard the paper began to tear. Ethan. Mason's voice lost some of its bravado. What's going on? You guys are going to NYU together, right? Ethan didn't answer. He turned on his heel and walked away, his steps fast and uneven, his shoulders hunched against the cool morning wind. He didn't look back at me, not even once, as he disappeared down the curve of the asphalt road. Mason watched him go, then turned to me, his expression a mix of confusion, jealousy, and a sudden creeping realization that the sister he had spent 18 years belittling had just leaped over a wall he could never climb. You really got in, he muttered, his voice small. I did, I said. I walked past him, up the steps, and into the house. The smell of my mother's burnt toast and cheap air freshener filled the hallway, but for the first time in my life, the house didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a station where I had been waiting for a train that had finally arrived. The atmosphere at the dinner table that evening was different. Usually, my father would spend the meal discussing Mason's varsity soccer matches or debating which local state university would be easy enough for Mason to get into. I was usually the quiet shadow at the end of the table, the one who cleaned the plates and kept her head down to avoid Mason's sharp tongue. But tonight, my mother had set out the porcelain plates, the ones with the gold trim that she only used for Thanksgiving or when my uncle visited from Chicago. Cornell, my father said, leaning back in his chair and rubbing his chin. Looked at me with a strange, unfamiliar squint, as if trying to recognize the girl sitting in my seat. An Ivy League. That's a big deal, Vivian. The local paper might even want to do a write-up on the county's top graduates. It's just upstate New York, Mason muttered, his fork aggressively moving the peas on his plate. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's practically a farm. School. Sophia's going to Manhattan. That's a real city. Mason, shut up, my father said. It was the first time in my memory that my father had ever told Mason to shut up. On my behalf. Mason froze, his fork suspended in midair, his face turning a dark, blotchy red. He looked at my mother, expecting her to defend him, but she was busy cutting a piece of roasted chicken and placing it onto my plate. Eat more, Vivian, she said, her voice unusually soft. You've been looking so thin lately. All that studying, you must have been exhausted. I looked at the chicken on my plate. I looked at the gold trim on the porcelain. 18 years, I thought. 18 years of being the plain, stupid, thick-skinned background decoration. They didn't love the new Vivian. They loved the prestige. They loved the fact that when they went to the local country club or the neighborhood block parties, they could say their daughter was going to an Ivy League school, while the neighbors' children were going to the local state branch. I'm full, I said, setting my fork down. The chicken remained untouched. Vivian, don't be rude, Mason began, his old arrogance trying to reassert itself. Mom made this for you. I said I'm full, Mason, I repeated, looking him directly in the eyes. For the first time, Mason did not make a face. He did not call me narcissistic or tell me I was plain compared to Sophia. He looked away first, his eyes fixing on his own plate, his shoulders slumping. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Snapchat. One new message from Ethan. I didn't open it. I went to my room, shut the door and locked it. Then opened the chat window, tapped on Ethan's profile and selected block. I did the same for his phone number. I didn't want the late-night explanations. I didn't want the desperate, guilt-ridden messages that only came because he realized the plain girl he had taken for granted was no longer within his reach. If he wanted to spend his college years chasing Sophia through the crowded streets of New York, he could do it without using me as his safety net. 3 months later, I was standing on the edge of the suspension bridge over Fall Creek Gorge. The air in Ithaca was different from the heavy, humid air of our suburban hometown. It was sharp, cold, and smelled of wet stone, pine needles, and the deep, dark water rushing hundreds of feet below. The red brick of the old campus buildings rose up against the gray autumn sky, looking solid, ancient, and entirely indifferent to the small dramas of human life. Walker. I turned. Clara, my roommate, was jogging toward me, her heavy wool coat open, her arms full of thick chemistry textbooks. She was a pre-med student from Boston, with sharp, practical eyes and a voice that could cut through any nonsense. You're going to freeze standing out here, Clara said, falling into step beside me as we headed toward the library. The wind off the lake is brutal today. Have you finished the organic chem lab report? Almost, I said. I just need to write up the conclusion. Good. Because if I have to look at those molecular models for another hour, I'm going to change my major to art history, she groaned, but her eyes were bright, with that competitive, frantic energy that seemed to define every student at Cornell. Here, no one knew who Sophia was. No one cared that I had spent 10 years chasing a boy who didn't see me. Here, I was just Vivian Walker, the girl who spent 5 hours in the library every Friday night, whose lab notes were so neat. The teaching assistant used them as an answer key, whose quiet determination was seen not as plainness, but as focus. Hey, Clara said, as we took our usual seats by the tall, arched windows of the library. Some guy from your hometown has been viewing my Instagram stories. Ethan something? He's listed as a mutual connection on your old profile. My fingers paused over the zipper of my backpack. Ethan. Yeah. He's at NYU, right? His profile is full of pictures of Washington Square Park and some girl with very expensive hair. Clara snorted. But he looks miserable in all of them. He's standing in the background like a lost puppy, while she's talking to other people. I looked out the window. Down below, the red and yellow leaves of the maples were drifting onto the gray stone paths. He's just an old neighbor, I said softly. Well, he's been looking at my posts every time I tag you, Clara said, pulling out her laptop. I think he's trying to see if you're still alive. Should I block him? No, I said. It doesn't matter. And it didn't. When I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the library window, I didn't see the girl who had cried over a slice of spicy stir-fried meat. I saw a girl who belonged in this library, among these heavy books and these high gray arches. The pain in my stomach was gone, replaced by the clean, quiet hum of a life that was entirely my own. While the leaves turned gold in Ithaca, Washington Square Park in Manhattan was a riot of noise, skateboards, and the smell of hot pretzels and exhaust fumes. Ethan sat on the edge of the stone fountain, his gray NYU hoodie pulled up against the damp city wind. In his hand was a paper cup of cold coffee. Ethan. Sophia walked toward him, her long wool coat swinging, her leather boots clicking on the concrete. She was surrounded by 3 other students from her fashion design program, 2 tall, wealthy international students from Milan and a junior whose family owned a gallery in Chelsea. We're going to the gallery opening on West 21st, Sophia said, not stopping as she reached the fountain. She didn't look at Ethan's face, she just waved her hand toward the street. You can come if you want, but we might go to a club in Soho afterward. It's $60 cover. I have a midterm tomorrow, Sophia, Ethan said, standing up. I thought we were going to get dinner. You said you wanted to try that Italian place near Lafayette. Sophia stopped, her friends turning to look at Ethan with polite, slightly bored expressions. Oh, Sophia said, her lips curling into a small dry smile. I forgot. But Lafayette is so crowded on Thursdays anyway. Go study, Ethan. We'll hang out this weekend. She turned and walked away, her laughter blending with the noise of the traffic. As she and her friends disappeared into the crowd heading toward the subway, Ethan stood by the fountain, the cold cup of coffee heavy in his hand. He had got what he wanted. He was in New York. He was at NYU. He was in the same social circle as Sophia, the girl he had spent 3 years documenting in his secret diary, the 1,096 pages of strawberry milk and unused movie tickets. But now that he was here, the dream felt thin. Sophia didn't wait for his messages because she had hundreds of other messages to reply to. She didn't drop everything to talk to him, because he was just another face in her large, glittering crowd. When he stood next to her, he wasn't the outstanding, handsome boy from our suburban high school. He was just a quiet kid from New Jersey who couldn't afford the $60 club covers or the $300 dinners she took for granted. He pulled out his phone. He opened Snapchat, but my name was no longer in his contact list. He searched for Vivian Walker, but the screen remained blank. He went to Clara's profile, the girl he had tracked down through mutual school connections. Her latest story was a short video of the Cornell Library. In the background, sitting by a tall window, was a girl with her hair pulled back into a simple clip, her head bent over a chemistry book, a small, quiet smile on her face as she explained something to her roommate. She looked beautiful. Not like Sophia, whose beauty was always loud, demanding, and expensive. Vivian's beauty was like the gray stone of the Ithaca Gorges, quiet, solid, and completely unaffected by the wind. Ethan closed the app. He threw the cold coffee into the trash bin and walked back to his tiny shared dorm room, the noise of Washington Square Park fading into a dull gray hum behind him. November came, bringing with it the first heavy snow of the season. The Walker family living room was warm, the television playing a football game in the background while the smell of roasted turkey filled the air. My father was sitting on the sofa, showing Mason how to carve the meat, while my mother was busy arranging the silver gravy boat on the table. The front door opened, and I walked in, carrying my duffel bag. "Vivian!" my mother cried, dropping the oven mitts and running to the hallway. She pulled me into a tight hug, a real, desperate hug that smelled of lavender, water and flour. "You're so cold. Look at your cheeks. Is it always this cold in Ithaca?" "It's colder," I said, smiling slightly as I set my bag down. Mason stood by the kitchen door. He was wearing his State University hoodie, a plain, gray thing from the local branch where he had ended up after his grades failed to secure him any out-of-state offers. He looked smaller than he had in the summer, his shoulders slightly hunched, the loud, aggressive sneer gone from his face. "Hey Viv," he said, his voice quiet. "Hey Mason," I replied. At dinner, my father did not talk about Mason's soccer. He talked about Cornell's endowment, about the research grants my department had received, about how the neighbor's son had applied to Cornell's engineering program and had been rejected. "They only take the best, you know," my father said, looking at me with a pride that felt heavy and unearned. "Our Vivian, she's always been the smart one." I looked at Mason. Usually this would be the moment he would snort, tell me I was thick-skinned, or make a joke about how plain I looked next to Sophia. But Mason remained silent. He kept his head down, eating his turkey, his fingers gripping his fork with a tight, defensive stiffness. "I saw Ethan yesterday," Mason said suddenly, his voice breaking the quiet of the table. The table went still. My mother stopped pouring the gravy. "He's back for the break too," Mason continued, not looking at me. He looks different. He lost weight. He asked me if you were coming home for Thanksgiving." "And what did you tell him?" my father asked, his brow furrowing. "I told him she was busy," Mason muttered. "That she's at Cornell. That she doesn't have time for high school stuff anymore." I looked at my brother. There was no mockery in his eyes. There was only a quiet, slightly awkward respect, the kind of respect a soldier has for someone who has survived a battle he was too afraid to fight. "Thanks, Mason," I said softly. He nodded once, then went back to his plate. For the first time in our lives, we had a dinner where the word Sophia was never spoken, and where I was no longer the background decoration. The day after Thanksgiving was cold and gray, the sky hanging low over our hometown like an old wool blanket. I walked into the local diner, the one with the cracked vinyl booths and the smell of grease and maple syrup. I had promised to meet Clara's cousin, who lived in the next town over, to hand off some textbooks she had left in my dorm room. But as I stepped through the glass door, the bell jingling above, I saw a boy sitting in the corner booth. It was Ethan. He was wearing a dark NYU jacket, but the sleeves were slightly frayed at the cuffs. He was staring at a half-empty mug of coffee, his fingers tracing the rim with a slow, hypnotic movement. I stopped. I wanted to turn and leave, but he looked up, and our eyes met across the quiet, empty diner. The color left his face. He stood up so fast his knee knocked against the wooden table, making the spoons clatter. "Vivian," he said. I didn't run. I had no reason to run. I walked over to his booth, my leather boots clicking softly on the linoleum floor. I stood at the end of the table, my hands in the pockets of my wool coat. "Hello, Ethan," I said. You look great," he muttered, his eyes tracing my face, my coat, the silver Cornell pin on my lapel. He looked tired, the city air having made him look pale and drawn, his hair slightly messy in a way that wasn't stylish, just neglected. "I tried to call you. I tried to message you on Snapchat, but I blocked you, Ethan," I said. My voice was calm, conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. He flinched. He sat back down in the booth, his hands sliding into his lap. No. I deserved it. I was a fool, Vivian. You got into NYU, I said, sitting in the booth opposite him. You're in the same city as Sophia. Isn't that what you spent 3 years writing in that diary? For Ethan let out a short, dry laugh that sounded like a sob. He rubbed his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking slightly. Sophia doesn't care, Vivian, he whispered, his voice cracking. She doesn't care about the movie tickets, or the strawberry milk, or the fact that I spent 3 years waiting for her. She doesn't even remember the name of our high school. To her, I'm just some guy from New Jersey who follows her around like a shadow. I looked at him. I remembered the 10 years I had spent chasing him, the way my heart would stop when he didn't reply to a message for 24 hours, the way I had cried over a slice of spicy stir-fried meat, because he had given it to Sophia. I had thought that seeing him miserable would make me feel victorious. I had thought that seeing him realize what he had lost would be the ultimate revenge. But as I sat across from him in the cheap, quiet diner, I felt nothing. No anger. No triumph. No grief. Just a vast, clean emptiness. She only cares about herself, Ethan, I said softly. But you knew that when you wrote the diary. You liked her because she was beautiful and out of reach. You liked the chase. No, Ethan said, reaching across the table, his hand trying to grasp mine. I was stupid. I thought you would always be there, Vivian. I thought that no matter what I did, no matter how much I ran after her, I could always come back to you. I didn't realize you were the only one who actually looked at me. I slowly pulled my hand back, placing it in my pocket, out of his reach. And you only look at me now because she doesn't look at you, I said. The words were quiet, but they fell between us like a heavy iron gate. Ethan froze, his hand remaining empty on the formica table, his green eyes filling with wet, desperate tears. Vivian. I have to go, Ethan, I said, sliding out of the booth. My friend is waiting. Will I see you at Christmas? He asked, his voice small almost pleading. Probably not, I said. I'm staying in Ithaca for the winter break. The research lab has some projects I want to work on. I turned and walked toward the door. I didn't look back at him. As the bell jingled above my head, the cold wind of our hometown hit my face, but it didn't feel cold anymore. It felt clean. In January, the snow fell thick and heavy over the gorges of Ithaca, turning the Cornell campus into a silent, white wonderland. I stood on the steps of the library, my breath forming soft white clouds in the freezing air. Clara was beside me, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate she had bought from the campus cafe. The grade reports are out, Clara said, handing me a cup. You got an A+ in Organic Chem, Walker. The professor wants you to be his research assistant next semester. Really? I smiled, the warmth of the cocoa heating my cold fingers. Really? You're a monster, Vivian, Clara laughed, nudging my shoulder. An Ivy League monster. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Mason. It was a picture of a local newspaper clipping. My father had indeed paid for a small announcement in the county paper, complete with my high school graduation photo and the words, Vivian Walker, Cornell, University class of 27. Beneath the picture, Mason had typed, Mom and Dad are showing this to everyone who comes to the house. Even the mailman had to look at it. You're famous, Viv. I smiled, a small, real smile, and slid the phone back into my pocket. I looked up at the gray sky, where the winter sun was trying to break through, the heavy clouds casting a soft, pearlescent light over the red brick buildings, and the deep, silent gorges below. The diary was gone. The strawberry milk was gone. The boy who didn't see me was gone. But as I turned and walked back into the warmth of the library, my boots leaving clean, deep prints in the fresh white snow, I knew that the real story, my story, had only just begun.